Now we come to the Bayeux Tapestry. And this is the best and most famous example of secular art in the Middle Ages. As a tapestry, it's really, I should probably change that, but I'm just going to let this slide sink in for a second. Yeah, pay attention to that. Okay, so the Bayeux Tapestry is a 200-foot embroidery. It's not actually tapestry. The difference being, an embroidery is needlework. So it's sewing the image onto a piece of fabric. A tapestry is where you weave the image into the fabric itself. So this is embroidery. This is needlework. So it's something very, very different. And it's meant for a civic or audience hall. And it's a continuous narrative, including the events that lead up to and the Norman Conquest. There's a lot of history here, so I'm going to try and cover it fairly quickly. First of all, let's go over the quick story of the Norman Conquest. And what we have is King Edward the Confessor, the Anglo-Saxon King of England at the top there. Then we have Earl Harold Godwinson, which we see on the left, and William of Normandy, known at this point as William the Bastard, on the right. So, how does this story happen? Well, first of all, Harold Godwinson is a close advisor to King Edward the Confessor. And Edward the Confessor has a bastard son. In other words, with a woman he never marries and the church doesn't recognize, which is William the Bastard, hence the name. Now, Harold Godwinson will go to war in France, and he will be captured where he's brought before William. And William basically says, I will either kill you or you will give me your crown. Consequently, Harold says, okay, here's the thing. I will happily give you the crown of England if I am offered it, which at the time was fairly clear that he would be. Edward dies, Harold gets the crown, and we get this mess. Harold becomes the King of England. He takes his men to the south coast, waiting for the Normans to arrive. Of course, the Normans won't arrive when they're prepared, because they're going to be there from January. All of a sudden, a group of Norsemen will show up because their ruler will claim the crown of England, because, of course, the crown is kind of up in the air at this point. So Harold marches his troops way up to the north of England, 187 miles, covering 37 to 45 miles a day. They fight the Norse invaders and win. Then they turn around and come back south, where they now have no soldiers left to defend England. Unfortunately, while they were gone, the Normans showed up. As they're marching south, this is also the time when the crops are being brought in. Many of his soldiers will leave, and he'll gain some more, but it's not the same army that just fought to the north because of this incredible fast march. And remember, these are volunteer soldiers. So after they get back, there's a close battle, the Battle of Hastings. It's much closer than we tend to think. Harold is defeated, William becomes king, and consequently is known as William the Conqueror. So that's what's happening. So in England, according to the chronicles, it's unclear who Edward wanted to appoint leadership upon his death, but of course, we see Harold taking that position. At the Battle of Hastings, what we see here depicted is really a sort of Greco-Roman influence conception of the Battle of Hastings. So the figures are very linear, very much in that Irish style that we saw in the medieval when we looked at the Book of Doro or the Book of Kells. The margins, above and below, primarily above, have a running commentary in Latin of what's going on, and the figures above them, these animal figures, are symbolic, although scholars argue about how symbolic they really are. And the entire tapestry is pro-Norman. But this makes a lot of sense when you look at the dating. We believe it was made sometime between 1071 and 1097. In 1071, a monk completed a history of the Dukes of Normandy and covers events that lead up to the Battle of Hastings from 1064 to 1066. The tapestry roughly follows this history. By 1097, the possible patron by the name of Bishop Odo dies, which narrows down our date a little bit. By 1080, Odo had been imprisoned, so this is why we get 1070 to 1080 as our most commonly cited dates for this piece. Now, this is probably produced in Canterbury, England, Canterbury at the time being very famous for its needlework, and it's known as the Opus Anglicum, or the English work. Also coming out of this Battle of Hastings, 1066, and William the Conqueror is something known as the Doomsday Book, which sounds quite horrible, but it's important historically because what it does is it is a record of everything that William has now inherited by conquering over England. So it's everyone's possessions, basically, their sheep, their houses, etc. Sounds a lot worse than it really is, unless, of course, you're Anglo-Saxon, then the Doomsday Book kind of fits in.